The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast about the 90s sitcom The Nanny, starring Fran Drescher. And we are here to talk about a very special episode of The Nanny. I am your host, Shawn Pasquale, here with my host,
Toria Sheffield.
When I say my host, it makes it sound like I'm crashing on your couch.
Which you are. I mean, you've lived here for months, and I didn't want to broach this on the podcast, but I feel like you need to figure things out.
All right, Toria, could you go back in your room and close the door? There's a lot of echo.
Everybody, that's a bit. Shawn doesn't live on my couch.
No.
Not yet.
No, Victoria recently moved, so congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually have two big couches, so if you or Liz ever need to leave in a fiery fit of anger.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
that's nice.
You both always have a spot. Or if you want to get mad and both end up here, but then make up here unexpectedly, I have two couches.
Oh, yeah. If Elizabeth and I ever get into like a knockdown fight, will you parent trap us by offering us both places to stay and then pretending like you didn't realize it was the same weekend and then being like, oops, I got to go out.
You have my word. My word. I will do
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. I appreciate it. You're a good friend. All right. So let's start at the top, ladies and gentlemen. This is an season 2, episode 25. It's called The Chatterbox. This is a very special thing that happens on TV. It generally only happens on TV, although there are some examples of movies that do it. But this episode is called a backdoor pilot episode. What's a backdoor pilot? Well, a backdoor pilot is an episode of an existing successful TV series that heavily features supporting characters or guest stars in previously unseen roles. Generally, you'll find that the main characters of the show sort of take a back seat. That's like another tenet of like backdoor pilots. And like all of a sudden we're thrust into this new world, and the intent from the creator's point of view, or sometimes the network, is to introduce you to all these exciting new characters. And then like, if the episode does really well, then generally, a couple weeks later, they'll announce like, hey, good news, we're spinning that show off. So some examples of that are like of the most successful ones would be, Happy Days, this old show Happy Days, spun off into this show Mork and Mindy, which was a show starring Robin Williams about an alien. A little more modern is there was actually an episode of The Office called The Farm, where they all go to Dwight's farm that he grew up on and spend like the whole episode with the Schrute family on the farm. That was a failed backdoor pilot. People did not like it. They were not interested, and the show never went anywhere. The Brady Bunch famously once did an episode called Kelly's Kids, in which we suddenly are not following the Bradys, but a whole new group of children right next door.
Yeah.
So shows do this kind of thing. It was a very popular sitcom thing to do. Facts of Life famously spun off from Different Strokes.
And I'll say this, it's different than just a regular spin-off, because a spin-off might just take a character, like for example, Angel is a spin-off of Buffy. He's a character who was in Buffy for a really long time, and then he was a beloved character, so they gave him his own show. But they never made like just a specific episode of Buffy to set up this character Angel, who maybe would then get his own show like in the following season. So they're slightly different.
Same with like after Friends ended, they did a Joey show all about Joey Tribbiani, but like they never did an episode of Friends where we suddenly meet all these new characters that Joey's going to interact with later. They just gave him his show. So the backdoor pilot is a very specific thing where we are literally kind of going away from our main cast and meeting this whole new group of people. And the intent is that they're going to wow us with this new storyline and these new characters, and we're going to all want to go along for the ride. In the case of the Chatterbox, not so much. Obviously there was no show called the Chatterbox that ever followed up from this. There was no, I don't think we ever see any of these characters again.
Oh, and I'll say this is so just to center people. This is the episode where Fran befriends this young actress who is auditioning for one of Mr. Sheffield's new shows. She doesn't get the part, but so Fran goes, hey, I'm going to my hairdressers in Queens. I know they're hiring shampoo girl, come along and maybe you can get the job. And the hair salon is called the Chatterbox. And we spend much of this episode in the Chatterbox interacting with like the crazy cast of characters that come in and out of this hair salon.
Yes, like 90% of the episode, honestly, is at the Chatterbox. It's really, it's a perfect example of a backdoor pilot because they literally do the thing where it's like, you see our characters for a little bit, our characters sort of introduce this new world, and then our characters just leave. And
I want to say this, I mean, obviously we love the show. We're pretty obsessed with the show. So I say this with love. This episode didn't work for me.
No.
And honestly, the thing is the absolute best parts for me were just the parts where we got to be with Fran, which is a testament to how much the Nanny works. Where, because I rewatched it this morning and I was literally laughing out loud at like the Fran, Niles, Cece stuff, and then was just kind of like, oh wait, why are we back at this salon now? Like, but we'll get into all of that. This has been we're doing a pretty long intro here just because this is such a like unique episode, and not everybody. I mean, people who maybe have watched this episode might have just been kind of confused after.
I feel like if we just flew into the description, it would be confusing in and of itself because all of a sudden we'd be like, so Mr. Anthony talks to Kim and Mary Ruth, and you'd be like, what happened to like Fran and Maxwell and Cece?
So this episode, okay, so we start off, everything seems relatively normal. We're sitting around the breakfast table, and it's established that Maggie is going to a friend's sweet 16, and she's going to get her hair done that day. And Fran is going to take her to like her go-to salon in Queens with Mr. Anthony. And Mr. Anthony owns the Chatterbox.
Yes. Now, they say the name Mr. Anthony, and they say the Chatterbox, I would say at least 15 times in this episode. Like, they say it a lot. They say the Chatterbox, the Chatterbox, the Chatterbox. She's like, Mr. Anthony. And then you get to the Chatterbox and they're like, Mr. Anthony, Mr. Anthony. So they're really trying really hard to like get it into the audience's head that like, this is a cool, important place that really means a lot to these characters, even though we've never heard Fran mention the Chatterbox before.
Well, and then we also establish that Sylvia, Fran's mom, is kind of having, it's not really a midlife crisis, it's a late life crisis, because Fran's on the phone with her at the breakfast table. And she's like, Ma, like, you're too old to get a job. Stop with this crazy talk. So, and so we established that Sylvia is interested in getting a job, even though she has been a housewife her whole life.
Yes.
We also have a pretty vicious dig at Cece where Niles serves her eggs.
I wrote this down.
Yes, Cece's also at the breakfast table. And she goes, Niles, my eggs are all dried up. And then Niles goes, the gene pool is saved.
Which is like a mean thing to say to a middle-aged woman.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's funny though. Okay. So then
Brighton comes home and we get, and still the episode's, you're like, okay, this is like a normal episode. Brighton comes in and there's all these like dancers in the house holding auditions with Mr. Sheffield, and Brighton.
It's after school. It's later that day. They're coming home from school. And
Brighton, in like typical hornball Brighton fashion, is like, oh my God, he did the dance auditions without me. Like, I'm so mad at him.
Then a woman walks in. She's dressed, kind of like a hippie, I would say, or I don't know, a little boho. She doesn't look like any of these other women. She's shorter, she's cute, but she's by no means this like buxom, tall showgirl type.
No, they go out of their way even to make a joke where she's like, what do these ladies got that I don't got? And then like four like giant chested women like walk out of the house past her. Like they're all like tall blondes with like big boobs, and they like dance out of the house past her. And she's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So it's like they really set up like Mary Ruth. That's her name.
Yeah.
Mary Ruth.
And she kind of, yeah. Well, she comes in with this kind of like clumsy, kind of adorkable energy. She doesn't look like a Zooey Deschanel from New Girl, but like that's slightly her vibe.
That's what they're, dude. I know. I clocked the same thing. They're definitely. It was almost like 10 years too early for adorkable. Because she feels miscast and she feels out of place in this time. But like, you're right. If she had shown up as a character on New Girl, you would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. She's like another like weird adorkable girl. But here she just seems like a little naive. I think they even call her naive at one point. Like, and she really plays up like the wide eye, like the doe-eyed actor kind of character.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, it wasn't even a real pilot. It was a backdoor pilot. So it kind of makes sense that maybe this character, who's clearly in their minds going to be potentially a big major character in a new show, she doesn't feel fully formed. You're kind of like, is she dumb? Is she smart? She's clearly very sweet, but like, is she, there's a few things happening at once where you're like, I don't fully feel like I know this person, but she's nice and she comes in and she's clearly very down on her luck. Like the first thing that happens is she runs into the mansion and she goes, can anybody break a 20? The cab driver says he'll wait if I can. And then we hear the cab just like speed off. So he's clearly gone with her 20. And one thing that I actually really enjoyed about this scene is, Fran sees her and kind of like instantly has an affinity for her and kind of has like big sister, little sister vibe. And she's like, you seem down on your luck. Like, let me take a look at your resume. Like, maybe I can give you some pointers from Mr. Sheffield. And she literally starts like schmoozing and doctoring the resume to, lying on it for her to give this girl a better shot at getting the job. And then she basically comes out of her audition. Mary Ruth, rather, comes out of the audition. Clearly didn't get it. Like,
Cece literally laughs her out of the room.
Yes.
Like, she literally is like,
yeah.
And she like kind of pushes her out of the room. And she's very upset. And this was the point in the episode where I started going, oh, we're spending a lot of time with this random Mary Ruth lady. Like, why do we care this much about her? And then Fran is sort of in the living room when she gets laughed out of her audition. And she's very sad. She doesn't know where she's going to stay. She doesn't have any money.
She reveals, actually, she goes, because Fran's like, who's your acting teacher anyway? Because it's, you can tell that this girl's probably she's not good at acting. And she's like, Fran goes, what are you paying this acting teacher anyway? And Mary Ruth goes, oh, well, nothing. I actually was living with him until he kicked me out because he met a girl with more, and then she looks down at where her boobs would be and she goes, talent. She goes, I have no money, no means of supporting myself and nowhere to stay, but I can't complain. And then Fran goes, you're not Jewish, are you? When she says, I can't complain.
Yeah. And they are, they're trying to set Mary Ruth up as like it makes sense, right? She's sort of Fran-esque. Fran is seeing a lot of herself in this woman who's like bubbly and positive, but like got screwed over by a guy. It's all very echoes of Fran sort of getting, fired from her, bridal shop. And which, by the way, why not just do a spinoff about the bridal shop? Like, we've only ever heard about this bridal shop in Flushing, and we have Fran's like weird friends. And it's like, that seems to me like, isn't that the spinoff? Isn't it like, oh, we're all going to the bridal shop and then we see all these weird characters there? It was so strange to me that they were like, we want to do a show about a hair salon.
Well, but here's the thing. I was like, oh, actually, just on paper, a hair salon makes so much sense. Like it's where women congregate. So and so many diverse, random women congregate, and where you hear about everyone's personal lives, and it's sort of like, it's a secret therapy place. So it made sense to me that you're like, what a fun set piece, or what a fun environment to create a pilot. So back to this episode, Fran takes pity on Mary Ruth and is like, well, hey, I'm actually heading out to my favorite salon in Queens. They're looking for a shampoo girl. Maybe they'll hire you. Like, come along. And Mary Ruth is really grateful and really sweet. And so like that sets up everything else that happens in this episode.
Weirdly enough, there has never been a TV series about a hair salon. There's been episodes.
I knew you were when you go quiet, I know you're Googling.
Yeah, I was curious because I was like, because you're not wrong. It does seem like the perfect sitcom setup where it's like, yeah, if we get like an anchor crew of like really funny people running this hair salon, and then we just have their personal drama, and then like different funny customers come in, like that does seem like, why wouldn't that be a TV show? But oddly enough, it's never happened. There's never been a successful hair salon show.
No, it's a very successful play, Steel Magnolia.
Yes.
And movies.
But yeah, so now we shift and we get to the Chatterbox, and we show up at the Chatterbox and we meet this guy, Claude, who's this British, saucy, gay guy.
Yeah. He's like the manager. He's like the manager who does all the scheduling, and he does haircuts too, but he does a lot of like admin stuff for this place.
Yeah. And he's maybe my favorite of the new characters that they introduced in this episode. I thought he was the only character that if this show had gotten spun off, I feel like that actor would have been kept and they may have recast some people.
So I agree. And while this role is very problematic today, and I don't think they should have a role like this now, Kim, the actress who played Kim did so much.
Lauren Tom, who you probably might recognize best as Amy from Futurama.
Amy. We're going to I basically profile her in trivia because I thought she deserved a little TLC based on what they did to her in this episode.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sad that yes, they cast this Asian woman to play this very hard Asian stereotype. It's really bad.
But I'll say this. It was a very, very over the top accent, and she's an American actress, but her lines were very funny, and none of her lines were at the expense of oh, I am a Chinese person.
No.
So I will say that it wasn't, it was just now we wouldn't do it. But okay, we get to the Chatterbox. Sylvia and Yetta, they're getting their hair done. And Anthony, or Mr. Anthony, he's not what I expected.
No.
He's basically John Travolta from Welcome Back, Kotter.
Yes.
He's in these tight jeans and a tight shirt, and he's thrusting his hips while he's, poofing people's hair with hairspray, and he's singing, and he's kind of gyrating. The ladies love him.
Love him.
In fact, so first, Yetta tips him by putting cash down his pants. Then he literally shimmies over to Sylvia because Sylvia's Ma, it's my turn to tip. And then he's there's a room over here. Hey, ha, ho. And he goes over to her, and she literally puts it, I don't even think in his pocket. I think she puts it right
she
into
puts
the crotch.
it down the front of his pants. She slowly puts the tip in, and he's hey, boo.
Yeah, it is a spot on, basically John Travolta 70s impression.
And this was the first misstep for me. Is this guy's he does a fine performance. Patrick Cassidy is the actor. He does a fine performance here, but to me, it just doesn't land. And it didn't make me go man, I want to watch an entire show about this guy.
So this guy should be one of the zany casts of characters in a sitcom, not the Mr. Sheffield parallel. You're just I do not see him being, it wasn't a missed cast. It was a role that was, I think, just poorly conceived for this world. We're not rooting, how is he the guy that you're rooting for anyone to get with when he's just hey, bada bing, bada boom, ha ha ha.
Yeah. They kind of try towards the end of this episode to soften that a little bit with because you meet his son and stuff, which we'll get into in a second, but it just doesn't work. It never really lands. The way he's introduced sort of sets him up a little too good, so that then later when they're oh, let's peel back a layer and see that he's really a softie, it's just meh, I don't buy it. And
I was shocked that he would, at first I thought he was just going to be a funny side character. I was shocked that was Mr. Anthony when they call him out. But so then, Fran gets there with Maggie and Mary Ruth in tow, and she, brings Maggie over to Mr. Anthony. And I was oh man, this is last week's episode with the Billy Ray Cyrus teen kissing contest. Because literally Mr. Anthony, he goes, ooh, you're 16, you're beautiful in your mind. Why don't you slip into something more comfortable? And I'm oh my God. I would drag my daughter out of this store and call the police. Yeah. But anyway, so that's happening. And, Fran introduces Mary Ruth to Mr. Anthony, and he's literally he looks at her resume and he goes, I only hire the best. Ooh, supercuts, which is a joke because Fran had actually added that to her resume before they went in. But so he's all right, you hired. And Mary Ruth is so grateful. She literally basically falls on her knees.
And these are supposed to be the leads, and there's no chemistry between them at all. They try really hard, but they just don't. He's a little too greaser, guy, and she's a little too meek, I think. And it just kind of, you don't have that instant, Fran and Mr. Sheffield, you have this instant chemistry between them when they show up on screen together. And when these two share scenes, you just don't, it never quite gets there.
Yeah. It's almost more like brother sister, actually.
Yeah. Good point, actually. Yeah.
And this is why screen tests where they do chemistry reads are genuinely very important.
Yeah.
But so, that happens. And then we set up though that that Sylvia wanted this shampoo girl job. And Fran is like, because she mentions it to Fran on her way out, she's like, I'm a shoo-in for the shampoo girl job. And Fran's like, oh, wait, so that's how I heard about that. And at first, Fran tries to sneakily convince Sylvia that she doesn't even want a job. But then it gets then Mary Ruth runs out and goes, Fran, I got this shampoo girl job. Thank you so much. And then Sylvia is like irate.
She's like mad. Yeah.
Yeah, she's super mad because she's basically like, Fran, you cost me this job that I really wanted. So the next scene, we go back to the salon. Fran is no longer there. And it's just sort of like later in that day. I mean, I'm going to also mention this in favorite lines, but earlier in the episode, we also had been introduced to the manicurist, Kim.
Yeah.
And she had this line where she does Sylvia's nails, and then Sylvia stands up and looks at her nails and she goes, all right, how long should I wait before I eat? And Kim looks her up and down and goes, about 4 years. I was like, you know what, Kim? I think you're my new favorite character.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. I mean, everyone's a caricature. They all feel like that. That's why I think this doesn't land, is no one feels like a real person in this salon. They all feel like caricatures of real people. Like even Claude is like more gay stereotype than just like a guy. You know what I mean? Like,
but it's interesting because you're kind of like, what is that magic? Like, what is the alchemy, that the line between that working and that not working? Because when you think, if I just described the Nanny pilot to you on paper, it could easily be that. It's rich dude, nervous, crazy little girl, meek teenage daughter, and, spunky boy, British butler, and then loud girl from Queens. There is a magic that happens when it works.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just, this is gonna sound so up my own butt when we're talking about TV, but there is a part of it's basically like a symphony, and you have to like hit every right note, and every note has to work together for it to become a finished piece that works. And this felt discordant. It was like lots of puzzle pieces fit in that just they're not larger than the sum. It didn't end up being larger than the sum of its parts, I think.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Whereas the Nanny just, it fit together. And I actually think that maybe a cool way into this concept would have been, what if you kind of did the role reversal of the Nanny, where maybe Mary Ruth was a really rich girl who had been down on her luck, and now she has to be shampoo girl in this working class queen salon.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would have been the hook that we could kind of hang on to, because that's the thing is, there's no real hook. It's just cast of crazy people thrown together.
Yeah, I mean, the hook, I think, I think the hook was supposed to be, it's like the Nanny. She's like a down on her luck lady who got thrown out by her man.
But that's high class, low class coming together, which is a high concept hook.
Not low class, low class.
Yeah,
it's like ending up in a low class place.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of people kind of all in the same boat thrown together, and they're just all quirky.
Yeah. So, all right. So we cut away. Now all of our main characters have left, but we stay behind and we continue to follow Mary Ruth. And she's like sweeping up, and we get like this weird sexual innuendo where Mr. Anthony comes in and he goes, "How was your first day?" And she goes, "Long, hard." And she's like guffawing because I guess it's supposed to be because he's like really hot, I guess. And she's like, blah, 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 blah. And then she's going to go home, but then she's like, "I don't have anywhere to stay." And he offers her a place to stay in the back room. He's like, "You can stay back there." And what is the line? He's like, "You can stay back there until my mom comes back."
No, he's like, "I mean, you can stay there, but just to warn you, it's not really fit for a human." He's like, "Oh, but when my mom stays, you got to leave."
Yeah.
Implying that that's where he makes his mom stay. So we know now we established she has a job here. She also is going to be living there.
Yeah.
And she's
which is hilarious. They are clearly like, if we do spin this show off, we're not building 50 sets. So she lives in the salon.
Yeah. And then Mr. Anthony walks out, and then this kid runs in, a kid who you will definitely recognize as the horrible child actor from Pish Upon a Star.
Yes.
But he's not that kid anymore. He has been recast as a boy named Mimo.
Why?
What is Mimo even short for? What could it possibly be short for?
Why Mimo? I kept writing in my notes, why did they call him Mimo?
And he, he's got his little backward cap on, his jeans. He's just, a kid from Queens, and he's clearly just been chased down the street by bullies. So he has a scratch on his forehead, and he comes running in, and Kim is like, "Oh, this is Mr. Anthony's son, Mimo." And Mary Ruth's like, "Oh my gosh, Mimo, like you have a cut on your forehead." And he goes, "Lady, I live in Queens and my dad owns a beauty parlor. It's pretty commonplace." So we established that he has this teen son. And while Mary Ruth is, very kindly trying to help him with this cut on his forehead, she opens up a drawer looking for a Band-Aid, at which point, and when she's about to open the drawer, Mimo's like, no, don't go in there. Don't go in there. And she finds there is a photo of a woman in there. And it turns out that it is Mimo's mother.
Yeah, cracked. The glass is like all shattered in the frame. And she's like, "Who is this lady?" And then we learn, oh, that's Mimo's mom. And you can't bring it up to Mr. Anthony. He's very upset. There's even a line about like, when they broke up, he punched that picture, and that's why it's all shattered. He was so, which again does not make Mr. Anthony like a likable character. You're like, oh, so he's got like weird anger issues. He's like punching this picture of this lady, and like,
I guess he's kind of like a tough guy. He's a tough guy. But so yes, Kim kind of explains the backstory. He was left, broke Mr. Anthony's heart, and like you can't speak of this woman. And so Mary Ruth is instantly like, "Oh my gosh, like I get it now. Like he, and this poor kid who just probably misses his mom." And she's kind of putting all of this into context. Then we actually do have a brief scene back at the mansion, because I would say like the B plot is the normal A plot. So back at the mansion, Sylvia's furious that Fran cost her the job. And she actually goes, "I was betrayed by my own daughter. Now I know how Nancy Reagan felt." I didn't know this reference, so I looked it up, and I found out that Patty Reagan, who is the Reagan's oldest daughter, went on record saying that her mom beat her as a kid, and said that Nancy was often in like a total medication fog in her childhood. They actually did go on to reconcile years later, but they had a pretty rough relationship for quite a while.
Not as rough as the most recent Nancy Reagan rumors that went around.
Which ones? Uh-oh. Tell me off the books.
I'll tell you off.
Okay.
I'll tell you off. Anyway, if you're curious, listener, just Google Nancy Reagan and you'll see what went on a couple weeks ago.
But so, and at this point, the front door swings open and Mr. Sheffield comes in dragging Maggie. And Mr. Sheffield is furious. Maggie is in a black wig. It's
like a bob cut wig,
like a
right?
chic French girl.
She looks like which I think tracks for the year that this came out, but her hair looks exactly like Uma Thurman on the poster to Pulp Fiction.
Totally. And Mr. Sheffield, it made me laugh.
She looks great, by the way.
Well, I would say this. I thought this was definitely them reaching for some conflict in this episode, because he's dragging Maggie and he goes, "Miss Fine, how could you?" And he goes, "I was walking down Park Avenue with my lawyer when he nudges me to look at the quote hot brunette." And he's like, "How could you let her wear this wig?" And I'm like, literally the point of a wig is you can just take it off. Like I would understand this level of anger if she had
cut and dyed her hair. Yeah, me too. When she first walked in, that's what I thought the bit was. And then he's like, this wig. And it's like, well, just tell her to take the wig off, dude. It's a wig. Also, why did they go to the hair salon just to get her a wig? I don't understand. And we're supposed to think Mr. Anthony is this like great haircut guy, like this great stylist. And then meanwhile, he sits her down and then he puts her in a wig. That's what he did.
And I'll say this. So like, wig and weave culture is not a big thing in white people salon culture. No. It is among other, races and ethnicity, which I would understand, but it's also usually more permanent. It entails a lot more work. This was literally just like a Party City wig that got
they just thrown on her head. Like they just put like a cute wig on her head. Yeah, and she looks great as a brunette, frankly. As everyone does. But
I went to a goth I have that exact wig now because I went to a goth party a few weeks ago where you had to dress up like a goth. And I mean, it was transformative. I was a totally different person. Everyone should get to wear wigs all the time.
I agree.
But Shawn, you are probably wearing your wigs right now, right?
I am. I'm wearing two. I always wear two. I put a bald cap on first and then I put a wig over it.
In my head, I am envisioning you with a beehive wig.
Yeah, I have a Sylvia-esque beehive hairdo.
I would love to see that. Okay, but so my next note goes, I go back at the salon and in the parentheses, why?
My next note is none of these actors have it.
Well, Mary Ruth is hanging out with Kim, the manicurist, and Claude, the sassy gay British manager. And the manicure reveals that she's married to a Jewish guy. And she goes, they make good husbands. No drinking, no cheating. And every Sunday, he in the mood for Chinese. And I just go, oh, this poor actress. She's really, she is selling it. She's giving it 110%. She is making her lines so funny. She has several of my favorite lines in this episode. But it's just, it's a big Asian stereotype role. And that's when we have like the big quote dramatic scene of the episode, where we're supposed to also really care about these characters.
Yeah, this is where it's like this is like the mission statement, it feels like, of what the Chatterbox show would have been, which is like, yeah, they're all weird, but like this place has heart, and the heart is Mr. Anthony and his relationship to his son, and Mary Ruth is going to, if this show spins off, she's going to sort of act as like the fulcrum between these two. And it seems like this is what the show would have been, right? Like the son would have had a thing happen. Maybe he would have like wanted to do something to like prove that he's like manly because his dad runs a salon and he's always getting beat up. And Mary Ruth would have to come in and sort of like, broker peace between them. Like that. This is really, I got the sense like this is them going like, okay, here's what the heart of this TV show would be. But it kind of never lands.
Yeah. And one thing that we kind of breezed over is a little early in the episode, Mr. Anthony had discovered that Mary Ruth had brought out this photo and he was basically like, stay out of my business, blah, blah, blah. So that it was established that, there's a little tension between them. So then in this big dramatic scene, she basically confronts him and is like, you know what, Mr. Anthony, like you're running away from intimacy because you're lonely. And Mr. Anthony's literally like, nobody wants that picture around. At which point little Mimo comes out and he sadly goes, I do.
Yeah.
And it's very much like a aw moment. And he's like, I just figured like if she ever came back, at least I'd be able to recognize her now.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
It's sad. But it's a little like, it's like too much. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, please, sir, I just want to have a little bit of porridge before Christmas.
Well, this whole emotional life of Mimo and the dad, and even the way Mimo acts, it actually felt dated for the 90s. It felt like an 80s very special episode, not a mid-90s heartfelt episode.
It felt like a Different Strokes episode. Like,
yes. And like even the way the kid, the way he sells everything, like, oh my God, there was this one scene where once Mimo gets back from school and his dad comes in, they do this little song and dance together, which is I think supposed to instantly communicate how strong their bond is. I was cringing.
It was like it was so bad.
I was so embarrassed for both of them.
It was so bad.
But anyway, so we established that Mimo wants this photo around, and he actually kind of wishes that maybe his mom's memory was more a presence in their lives. And Mr. Anthony has learned a lesson, and Mary Ruth has helped him learn that lesson. And that's the end of that.
That's kind of it. Yeah.
And we then have the last scene that's back. This last scene, we've got some horny Mr. Sheffield apps.
That's my note is I wrote last scene. Fran can't return the Maggie wig, so she wears it, and Mr. Sheffield gets horny because that's the description of the scene.
Oh my god! Yeah,
he's so Mr. Sheffield is like railing about like this wig and it's terrible and blah 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 blah, and they can't do it, and like nobody looks good in this wig.
Yeah,
and then,
because Maggie comes down the stairs ready for the party, and she's totally back to her normal self, and he's like, there's my little girl back, and he's like, now go to that party, and he's like, and trust me, no boy in his right mind would have liked anyone in that ridiculous wig anyway. And he like closes the door, turns around just as Fran is descending the stairs in the wig.
Yeah, and like a tight pleather outfit.
Yeah, and like truly, I mean, Mr. Sheffield he's playing horny. Like that is the director's no. He literally goes, oh, Miss Fine, and he goes, what do you say we take in some ice cream after all, or go get some ice cream after all? And she's like, I thought you said you were tired. And he's like, what? Who said that? No, not me. And and like literally, yeah. And he's like, I'll hail us a cab.
He goes, not me. And then Niles comes in and he goes, sir, I drew your bath and I put a sifter of brandy next to it. And then he's like, what? Why do I want that? We're going out for ice cream. And then Niles goes, well, it would be a shame for the bath to go to waste. And he starts to unloosen his tie as if he's going to go take the bath.
Yes. And then Mr. Sheffield comes. Oh, and well, Fran's like, ugh. She's like, now he's all about this wig after he made such a huff. I don't know whether to be flattered or offended. And then Mr. Sheffield comes back in from hailing a cab and he goes, and why don't we take in a movie? And then she's like, all right, flattered it is. So she's just happy to be on the gravy train of free stuff if the wig is going to get her like tickets to movies and ice cream. But I just wrote, wow, is he just going to jerk it to Fran later?
Yeah.
Is that what their relationship has become?
Yes. He's going to go do a movie and have ice cream, and then he's going to come home and he's going to like think about her in that way.
Ugh.
It's so weird.
And I'm like, and she's just like, cool. They're just all cool with it.
And then that's it. And then that's the episode. It's over. And you're like, oh, okay.
Alrighty. Okay.
Right.
That's it.
There's not even a button. There's not even like a credits button. It just ends. It ends with them leaving to go get ice cream and Mr. Sheffield being like, va 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 voom.
Yeah, like literally if there could have been a sound effect for an erection, it would have gone off.
Yeah. When she comes down the stairs, it would have been like, boing, boing, boing. Yeah.
So should we move on to segments?
The quickest segments section we've ever done. Yes.
Oh shit. Yeah. We've gone on a long time. Okay.
Let's move on to segments.
Okay.
And now segments.
So segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria.
So favorite lines.
I said a lot of mine, but I will say one that I forgot to mention is when Kim, the manicurist, is doing her nails. Mary Ruth is like, oh, you're so talented. And she's literally like, yes. And she like squints at one of her nails and she goes, this is my country. This is my sister. This is her husband. And that's the cat.
Yeah.
So she's like literally her whole bit is that she paints these like intricate portraits on each nail, which made me laugh.
Yeah. I think I also said my line, like the gene pool is saved was probably the best zinger of the episode. And then I really liked Niles being like, well, I shouldn't let the bath go to waste and undoing his tie. Cause just the idea, I love when they sort of establish that Niles just treats himself whenever Mr. Sheffield's away. I think that's so funny that he just like enjoys like their rich life whenever he can.
As he should.
As he should.
Nanny trivia. I'll make it pretty quick, but I said, let's give Lauren Tom a little TLC since she's incredibly deserving of some credit in, that there weren't probably many roles for Asian actresses or Asian American actresses back then. And when they did get them, it was, okay, put on your big accent, even if you didn't have one. And she also, I think, did wonders with this, what could have been a one-note role. And she also has a really cool body of work independently of this. So she was born in Chicago. She's the daughter of Nancy and Chan Tom. And she has a brother named Chip. But so her parents were actually born in Chicago. Their grandparents came from China. So she was born and raised in Chicago, grew up Catholic in a largely Jewish neighborhood.
Yep.
She kind of got her start in her teens. She landed a spot with a touring company of a chorus line when she was just 17 in a Broadway production of the show. She's won an Obie Award for her off-Broadway acting. She was cast in several Broadway shows with like bigger parts. And she's, been in several movies. But again, as Shawn mentioned earlier, you might know her voice at least best from Amy Wong in Futurama, but she also was the lead role in 1993's The Joy Luck Club, which was a very big movie.
Yeah.
She was also in When a Man Loves a Woman and North. And I loved North.
Yeah, she was in Bad Santa. I mean, she's worked consistently like forever. She was like, she always works, and she's a great actress. She's an even better voice actress, which is what she sort of did later in her career. She shifted to like, she did Amy in Futurama. She also did all of Amy's parents. So like the Wongs. She did Amy's mom, who's like a little closer to this character in this episode. She was on so many shows.
She was, probably her biggest role in a sitcom would be Julie on Friends, who is famously Ross's fiance.
Right. That's right.
So
I forgot she did that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I literally just made that connection just now while we were talking.
Yeah.
And then in terms of Yiddish for the episode, there wasn't any Yiddish, so I just looked up the Yiddish term for backdoor pilot.
What is that?
No, there's not.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. There was no Yiddish.
The other funny bit we didn't really point out is at one point in the salon, you hear someone scream from the back room, and Mary Ruth goes, "Oh my God, what is that?" And
Kim goes,
"Oh, that's just someone getting a bikini wax." And then Yetta shuffles out from the back.
Yes. Oh, she's keeping it tight. And then for the Fran or the Cece, no. Oh, wait. Sorry. I said for the Fran and the Cece, I said actually for this episode, let's do the Claude or the Kim.
Ooh, I love that. Okay.
Yeah. I think
go ahead.
I love doing my nails. So just by pure literal, if we're just going to go literal, I'm the Kim.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm the Claude because I'm saucy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we'd be
saucy.
the Claude. That's who we would be cast as in this in this role.
And we would have been equally as miscast as everyone in this episode. So,
but anyway, so that was the episode. Again, I don't. When we're harsh or critical, it always comes from a place of love. And I would hope that, every all of the creatives involved probably also can see why, why we felt this way, I should say.
Listen, there are more failed backdoor pilots than successful ones. So I don't think that there's anything in this episode that's like they did it wrong. It's a hard sell. It's a really hard sell sometimes, especially when you have a hit show and you're spending 30 minutes away from your hit characters. You're asking a lot of the audience. It is what it is. Next week's episode is the season finale of season 2 of The Nanny, and strong episode. What we'll talk about next. Yeah. So, as always, if you like this show, please rate and review. You can do that on Apple Podcasts. You can do it on Spotify now. You could just, share the show on your social media and say, I really love this show. You guys should listen to it. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter or Instagram at Mr. Chef. Mr. Chef Pod with 2 Fs. Mr. Chef Pod.
We have about a 50% success rate of correctly naming our show's social media. But yeah, Mr. Chef Pod. And we love hearing from you. So always reach out. We love it.
And we'll be back next week with more The Nanny. Bye.
Bye.
The Flashing Girl from Flushing. The nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.